The Outcast Boy and the Forest of Fear. In the sun-baked village of Makolo, nestled between red clay hills and golden savannas, the drum spoke louder than reason. And that morning, they beat for exile. "Tamba is cast," cried Mama Zula, pointing her crooked finger toward the trembling boy in the middle of the gathering square. Her many necklaces clattered as she shook with fury. "Ever since his parents died, bad luck has haunted our village like a hungry lion." Chief Combo, seated on his carved wooden throne, his eyes hard as stone, merely nodded. He was seen sneaking around the storehouse. And now the chief's ivory is gone. What more proof do we need? But I didn't take anything. Tamba's voice cracked with desperation. His knees were scraped, and his bare feet were caked in dust. His skin gleamed with sweat and shame. "I saw you, Chief. I saw you selling the ivory to the men with the white truck near the river." A gasp rolled through the villagers like a ripple on water. Chief Combo's eyes narrowed. "Lies from the mouth of a cursed orphan," Mama Zula hissed. Without trial, without comfort, without goodbye, Tamba was cast out of Makolo. The sun was falling when Tamba passed the edge of the village, his little Shushan box bouncing against his side with every step. Inside were only the things he could call his own: 2 brushes, an old rag, a small bottle of polish, and a worn photo of his parents. They smiled in the picture, his mother with her beautiful teeth and his father wearing a dusty cap. The photo smelled like wood smoke and mango leaves. Tamba didn't look back. Before him rose the twisted trees of Bomb Forest. Children in Makolo spoke of the forest in whispers. They said spirits lived in the mist. They said drums beat by themselves. They said people went in and didn't come out. But Tamba had nowhere else to go. He stepped over the vine-covered boundary and vanished into the dark. The forest swallowed the light almost at once. Even the birds seemed to keep their distance. Strange clicks and murmurs filled the air like the muttering of old ghosts. Tamba walked until his legs gave up. A massive baobab tree stood like a guardian among the others, its trunk so wide it would take 10 men holding hands to circle it. He dropped his Shushan box beneath the roots and curled into a ball. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but he had nothing to eat, nothing to drink. He held the photo of his parents to his chest and tried to remember the sound of their voices. His father had once told him, "When the world turns its back on you, son, remember that the trees still listen." So Tamba whispered to the trees, tears streaking down his dusty cheeks. "I didn't do it," he said. The trees said nothing back. That night was cold. Colder than the worst harmattan wind. The forest creaked and groaned like an old man dying. Shadows moved where there should have been none. Tamba did not sleep. He only trembled. At dawn, the air was thick with mist. Tamba's stomach roared like a drum. He stood, brushed dirt off his knees, and hugged the photo before putting it carefully back in the box. That's when he heard it. A deep rumble, far off. Not thunder. Not drums. He followed it through the trees, barefoot and cautious, until he came to a slope. Below him, where the earth had recently shifted, a landslide had torn a scar through the forest floor. Trees lay uprooted, rocks shattered, and mud slathered everything like porridge spilled from the sky. And something was moving. Tamba squinted. There, tangled beneath broken branches and heavy rocks, lay a serpent longer than a truck. Its scales shimmered like emeralds touched by sunlight. But it wasn't moving much, just a flicker of the tail, a slow heave of its chest, and the low, aching sound that had drawn him there. A whimper. The serpent was trapped. Tamba froze. Every story he'd ever heard shouted in his head, serpents are messengers of the underworld. Serpents bring misfortune. Serpents swallow boys whole. But the serpent's eyes were closed. And it was bleeding. He took a cautious step forward. Then another. Something about it reminded him of the village goat that got caught in wire once, how it struggled until his father helped free it. Back then, Tamba had been too scared to help. He'd only watched. He wouldn't just watch this time. He dropped his shushan box and began clearing smaller stones first, his tiny hands shaking. He cut his fingers, bruised his arms, but he walked without stopping. The serpent did not strike. It did not hiss. It simply breathed, soft and shallow. The Serpent Queen reveals herself. Tamba's fingers were raw. For hours, he toiled under the sun and the shadow of bomb forest, lifting rock after rock with bleeding hands. Dirt clung to his torn fingernails, and his muscles ached from the effort. Still, he pressed on, driven not by duty, but by something deeper. Something that whispered, "Do not turn away from the suffering of others, even if they are monsters." The great serpent did not move. It only breathed. Tamba struggled with one last stone, heavier than the rest. He dug his feet into the mud, gritted his teeth, and pushed until his arms trembled. With a final grunt, the stone rolled free, and the serpent's tail slid loose. Tamba fell back, panting, staring at the creature he had just freed. It stretched slowly, coils glistening like river water, raising its mighty head to the sky. The sun caught its eyes, eyes of gold, deep and wise, older than any he had ever seen. He waited for it to strike. But it didn't. The serpent simply looked at him. Long and silent. Its tongue flicked once. Then it slithered away into the trees, soundless as smoke. That night, Tamba returned to the baobab tree. He had no food. No water. No comfort. But for the first time in days, he felt warmth. Not from fire or blankets, but from within. He had done something good. Something brave. The kind of thing his father would have smiled at. He placed the photo of his parents beside him and curled up, letting the soft rustle of the leaves lull him into uneasy sleep. But sleep would not last long. For at the stroke of midnight, the wind shifted. The baobab tree shivered. Tamba opened his eyes and gasped. There, rising from the earth like a whisper made flesh, stood a tall woman cloaked in scales that shimmered silver and green. Her eyes were the same golden hue as the serpent's. Her hair flowed like braided rivers, and around her neck hung a necklace of glowing teeth, jewels of ancient beasts. She looked down at him, regal and still. "I watched you, child," she said, her voice both thunder and lullaby. "I saw you bleed for a creature others would have fled from." Tamba scrambled to sit upright. Are you the serpent?" "I am more than the serpent," she replied. "I am Nyoka, queen of the bomb forest. Guardian of the old ways. Your hands freed my body, but your heart freed my spirit." Tamba's lips trembled. "You're not going to eat me?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Foolish boy. I came to bless you." She knelt beside him, placing a cool hand on his shoulder. From beneath her robe, she drew 3 scales, each one no larger than a mango seed, but glowing with soft, pulsing light. "These are my gifts to you," she said. 3 serpent scales of power. Each one holds a wish, but beware, they respond to the spirit in which they are used. Tamba took them in his trembling hands. The scales felt alive, warm, humming faintly. "You may call upon them in moments of great need. But never use them in anger, jealousy, or revenge. If you do, the forest will remember." Tamba looked up, confused. "Why me?" The Serpent Queen stood tall once more. "Because you gave when you had nothing. Because you listened when the world turned deaf. And because your time in this forest is already borrowed." She raised one hand to the stars. The sky above them shimmered. In bomb forest, time flows like a river underground, fast, hidden, and different. One day here is 1 year outside. You have already lost much. Tamba's breath caught. 1 year. Yes. And your journey has just begun. She reached out, brushing his forehead gently. Now sleep, child of courage. And awaken where your next path begins. Tamba blinked. When he opened his eyes, the baobab tree was gone. So was the night. He stood in a glowing underground chamber, carved from roots and crystal. Light poured from the ceiling like rain. In the center of the room stood a throne of stone, shaped like a serpent coiled in rest. He spun around in awe. Flowers glowed in the walls. Water trickled through vines that sang like flutes. He clutched the scales to his chest, afraid they would vanish. But then the Serpent Queen appeared once more, this time behind the throne, her face solemn. "This is not your home," she said softly. "This is your passage." "I don't understand," Tamba said. "I thought I was safe here." "Safe," she echoed. "Perhaps. But purpose waits beyond safety. And your gift is meant for the world outside." She stepped forward, arms wide. "Go now, Tamba. Take the wisdom of the forest with you. And remember, true power lies in kindness, not in force." A gust of wind swept the chamber. Light swirled. The scales in Tamba's hand grew warm again. And the world went white. When he opened his eyes, Tamba was lying on the forest edge. The baobab was gone. The trees looked thinner, older. The wind smelled different, richer, foreign. He stood slowly, his Shushan box beside him, untouched. The scales still rested in his hand. He stepped through the last line of trees. And gasped. The path to Makolo was no longer familiar. The fields were different. The village had grown. Huts he remembered were now gone, replaced by newer buildings. Children played in the distance, but none he recognized. A tall tree he had once climbed as a boy was now a crumbled stump. Years had passed. Tamba had been gone only a day. But the world had aged without him. A new beginning and a village in crisis. The sun burned hot as Tamba stepped into the bustling town of Moli, his Shushan box slung over his shoulder, and the 3 glowing serpent scales wrapped carefully in cloth. His clothes were ragged, his face still that of a boy grown too fast, but something about his eyes had changed. He was no longer the frightened orphan who had been thrown from Makolo. He was a boy who had spoken with a queen of scales. And he carried her magic with him. In the open-air market, colors burst like song, red peppers, golden melons, boats of cloth that fluttered like wings. Traders called out, children chased chickens, and the scent of roasted yams and cassava filled the air. Tamba wandered until he found what he was looking for, a merchant under a red canopy, hunched behind a stall of polished gems and precious stones. The man had eyes like knives and a mouth that never smiled. Tamba stepped forward and unwrapped a single serpent scale. The merchant squinted. "What is that?" "A painted shell." Tamba said nothing. The man reached for it, and his fingers recoiled. The scale pulsed, humming with power. He blinked. This is not from this world." Tamba nodded slowly. "How much is it worth?" The merchant stared at him, then glanced left and right. "Name your price." "Enough to buy land. Build a home. Feed the hungry." The man hesitated, then beckoned him behind the store. By the time Tamba left Moli, he carried a sack of gold beads, rare salt stones, and 3 deeds, signed, stamped, and legal. He looked back at the town one last time, then turned toward Makolo. He returned in secret. Years had passed. No one recognized the taller, stronger boy in the brown cloak. His voice had deepened, and his scars had faded. His name had vanished from the village like dust. The land where his parents once lived was overgrown. Weeds rose from the ashes of the fire that took them. But the earth still remembered. Tamba knelt, placed a small carved totem where their hut had once stood, and whispered, "I'm back." Then he began to build. Within weeks, a house rose from the earth, stronger and finer than any in the village. Walls of carved timber, a roof of ironwood leaves, and windows that caught the morning sun. Beside it, a well with clean water. Behind it, a granary. Children whispered when they passed. He built that by himself. No one knows where he came from. Maybe he's a spirit. Tamba never argued. He used part of his fortune to buy food and tools for the poor. When a widow's hut collapsed, he paid for repairs. When a child fell ill, he sent herbs from Mali. He never boasted. He never asked for thanks. But still, the whispers grew. Mama Zula sat outside her compound one evening, shelling groundnuts. Her lips curled into a sneer as she watched the new man pass. "I know that face," she muttered to her daughter. "I know that look." Her daughter blinked. "Who, Mama?" "That man. He walks like Tamba." The daughter laughed. "Tamba? That cursed orphan. He'd be long dead in Bomb Forest." But Mama Zula narrowed her eyes. She remembered too well the fire that claimed his family. And she remembered how easily they blamed him. Chief Combo, too, watched from afar. The man who had once framed a boy to protect his ivory smuggling secret now sat in a dusty, broken palace. His riches had thinned. His allies had left. But he remembered the boy with quiet eyes. The boy who saw too much. Then, the rains came. At first, they were a blessing. The villagers danced barefoot in the wet soil. Buckets filled. Thirst was quenched. But the skies did not stop. Day after day, water poured like wrath from the heavens. The river swelled. The crops drowned. Chickens floated away. Huts caved in, one by one. Then came the flood. It roared through Makolo like a beast, tearing down fences, uprooting trees. People screamed. Livestock vanished. Babies cried out from rooftops. Tamba stood atop his hill, watching the village below drown in brown water. His house stood firm. The forest had taught him how to build. But Makolo had not listened. In the aftermath, villagers gathered in the broken square, shivering under palm mats. "We have no food," cried one. "No dry land," sobbed another. "The river took my child," whispered a third. And then, Chief Combo stood up, his robes muddied, his staff broken. "We must ask the stranger for help." Gasps rose. "Never." Mama Zula spat. "He's not one of us." But others murmured, "He gave me cassava. He fixed my roof. He helped when no one else did." So the chief swallowed his pride. And he went. Tamba stood on his porch when he saw the villagers climbing the hill. Chief Combo at the front. Mama Zula behind him, her eyes avoiding his. They knelt before him. Chief Combo's voice was low. "Humble. We beg you, stranger. Help our people. We are starving. Homeless. Dying." Tamba looked down at the man who once cast him out. At the woman who had lied. At the village that turned its back. He could say nothing. But the serpent scales burned in his palm. Two remained. He reached for them, then paused. The Serpent Queen's voice echoed in his mind, never in anger. Never in revenge. He breathed slowly. Could he help them? Should he? Was he still that boy? Or had Makolo lost its chance? The morning after the villagers begged for help, the sky cleared for the first time in weeks. The air was heavy with silence, as if the land itself was waiting to see what Tamba would do. He stood before the crowd gathered at the base of his hill, the same villagers who once cast him out. Many bowed their heads. A few dared to meet his gaze. Among them stood Mama Zula, arms folded, lips pursed. Behind her, Chief Combo, trying to look humbled, but his eyes flickered like a cornered snake. Tamba slowly stepped forward, holding the cloth bundle that contained the final two serpent scales. He stopped in front of them, unwrapped the cloth, and let the villagers see what shimmered in his hands. Gasps rose from the crowd. The scales glowed like moonlight trapped in stone, alive with silent magic. Tamba raised his voice, quiet but strong. You know me, though you pretend not to. I am the boy you left in the forest. The orphan you called cursed. The one you accused of killing his parents. I am Tamba. A deep silence fell, broken only by the rustling of the wind. Mama Zula's face paled. Chief Combo stepped back, mouth slightly open. A child whimpered and clung to her mother's waist. Then someone dropped to their knees. Another followed. Soon, half the village knelt before him. Only Mama Zula and Chief Combo remained standing, their bodies stiff as carved wood. Without another word, Tamba took one glowing scale and held it high. The light flared, expanding like a sunburst, blinding, warm, holy. He stepped toward the edge of the village, where the floodwaters still pooled. As he walked, the scale hummed louder. Then, as if answering a call, the water began to shimmer. It shifted. Dark mud turned clear. Filth vanished. The fields lifted from beneath the water, green and alive. Yams and maize sprouted instantly from once drowned rows. Banana trees unfurled their leaves. Wells overflowed with clean water. The people gasped. A boy dropped to the ground and wept. A grandmother kissed the soil. Someone whispered, "He's not cursed, he's blessed." That night, Makolo danced. Drums echoed beneath the moon. Palm wine flowed. Songs rose from tired throats, made joyful again. Children laughed, chasing fireflies. Elders clapped hands in rhythm, praising ancestors. And at the edge of it all, Tamba stood alone. He watched with a heavy heart. Forgiveness was a choice. But trust, that took more time. Hidden in the shadows, Mama Zula watched him too, her eyes narrow, her thoughts dark. He would destroy the order of things, she muttered to her daughter. A boy with magic and no fear. He has already replaced the chief in their eyes. She clenched her fist. We must act before it's too late. Meanwhile, Chief Combo paced inside his crumbling compound. The whispers were louder now. Villagers passed without bowing. Some called him old man, others ignored him completely. Even Mama Zula no longer sought his advice. And Tamba's name was everywhere. The former chief poured himself palm liquor and stared into the fire. If he could be accused once, he muttered, he can be accused again. 2 days later, a terrible cry echoed from the chicken yard. People rushed to find a dozen birds dead, twisted, bloated, eyes glassy. Someone found a strange powder scattered on the ground. Mama Zula's daughter screamed, "Poison!" In the square, a panicked woman shouted, "It's the stranger. He's bewitched our animals." Another whispered, "He came with power. Maybe now he wants control." Then Chief Combo stepped forward, sorrow in his eyes, voice trembling with false sadness. "Perhaps we put too much trust in one man. One who holds magic we do not understand." The crowd murmured, uncertain. Mama Zula stepped beside him, clutching a chicken feather dusted with white powder. "I found this behind his house," she lied. "He uses charms. He brings the rain, yes, but what else does he bring?" By evening, the village was divided. Half still believed in Tamba, those he had helped, those who had seen the miracle with their own eyes. The others were afraid. Fear twisted memories. Fear made people forget. Tamba stood again in the square. This time, he was not surrounded by grateful villagers, but by doubt. Chief Combo pointed a crooked finger. "You say you came back to help, but now chickens die, the wind changes, and strange dreams come to us. Are you truly a savior, or a curse returned to finish us off?" Tamba said nothing. But his hand trembled at his side, where the final serpent scale lay hidden. He could end this. With a whisper and a thought, he could silence Combo. Strip Mama Zula of her lies. Make the whole village see what they had done. Use it, a voice in his heart urged. They deserve it. But another voice, quieter, wiser, rose from memory. The Serpent Queen's words. Power born from pain turns into poison. Never in anger. Never for revenge. Tamba closed his eyes. He took a breath. And then he stepped forward, not to raise the scale, but to raise his voice. Yes. I am the boy you cast out. Yes. I returned with magic. But not to curse you. Not to punish you. He turned to Mama Zula, whose eyes widened in fear. You lied about me. You made me an orphan twice over. She gasped. He turned to Chief Combo. You framed me for crimes you committed. Combo flinched. Then Tamba did the unthinkable. He knelt. And I forgive you both. A long silence. Even the wind stopped. Mama Zula sank to her knees, shame painting her cheeks. Chief Combo stared at him, confused, angry even. He wanted power, not pity. But Tamba rose to his feet and faced the village. You can choose to live in fear of me. Or walk beside me. But I will not walk in anger. The forest showed me mercy. I offer the same to you. Some wept. Others turned away. A few clapped. The village was split. Divided. But the line between power and peace had been drawn. And Tamba had chosen. That night, alone under the baobab tree, Tamba looked at the final serpent scale. It no longer glowed. Its magic remained, but its temptation no longer pulled at him. He whispered into the branches. Thank you, Serpent Queen. I didn't forget. The wind rustled the leaves gently, as if in approval. And somewhere deep in the bomb forest, something ancient smiled. The rains had passed. The crops were green. Peace, though fragile, had settled over Makalo like morning mist over a quiet field. In the heart of the village, where nothing had grown before, Tamba dug a hole with his bare hands. The earth was rich. He planted a small baobab seedling, no larger than a child's arm. The villagers watched in silence. Then Tamba stood, wiped the dirt from his palms, and said softly, "This will be the tree of mercy. A reminder that kindness can take root even where pain once ruled. No drums. No cheers. Just the quiet understanding of something sacred being born." Days turned to weeks. The tree grew faster than nature should allow, its trunk thickened, its branches stretched skyward, and its roots curled deep beneath the village. People began to gather beneath it to talk, to share food, to rest. One old man whispered, "It feels like the tree watches over us." Tamba simply smiled. But peace never comes without a final test. One morning, whispers spread across Makalo like fire on dry grass. Mama Zula is dying. Her once commanding frame now lay curled like a withered leaf. Her eyes, fierce only weeks ago, were clouded with sickness. Her breath rattled. The healer shook her head. The herbs did nothing. Some said it was punishment. Others called it justice. But Tamba said nothing. That night, long after the village slept, he crept into her hut with a bundle wrapped in cloth. The final serpent scale. He knelt beside the woman who had destroyed his childhood, and placed the shimmering scale upon her chest. "Not for you," he whispered. "But for the mercy I want to carry." The light grew, warm and golden. Mama Zula's breath steadied. Her skin cooled. Her eyes fluttered open, weak with confusion. And Tamba was already gone. He returned to his home and stood silently beneath the tree of mercy. And that's when the air changed. A cool wind curled around his ankles. The stars blinked, and the leaves above him began to glow. From the shadows stepped a figure cloaked in silver scales, eyes like river stones, voice like distant thunder. "You have done well, Tamba," said the Serpent Queen. Tamba dropped to his knees, not out of fear, but reverence. "I nearly failed," he said. She stepped closer, her beauty otherworldly, yet somehow maternal. "That is why you succeeded. Mercy is never born from ease. Only from struggle." She raised her arms. The baobab shimmered, its trunk glowing, its leaves bursting into golden blossom. "This tree will stand for generations. It will watch over Makalo. No curse, no hunger, no war shall touch this soil while its roots remain." Tamba looked up, tears in his eyes. "What am I now?" She smiled. "You are the keeper of mercy. Not because you have power, but because you gave it away." Then, like mist before sunrise, she vanished. And Tamba was alone. But never again lonely. The next morning, Chief Combo was gone. He fled before sunrise, taking only what he could carry. Some say he vanished into the hills. Others claim the forest swallowed him whole. No one mourned. The villagers gathered under the baobab and, with one voice, called Tamba their new leader. "Not a chief of power," said the elders. "A guardian of hearts." Tamba accepted, not as a ruler, but as a servant. He rebuilt his home with wide walls and open doors. He welcomed orphans, the forgotten, the poor. No one left hungry. No one slept alone. Years passed. The tree of mercy grew massive, its roots holding Makalo like an embrace, its shade offering peace to all who sat beneath it. Tamba aged. His beard grayed. His back bent. But his spirit never wavered. And every evening, children gathered under the baobab to hear his stories. One day, as the sun dipped low and the fireflies began to blink, a little girl asked, "Grandfather Tamba, is it true you had magic?" He chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Magic? Perhaps. But the real magic wasn't in the scales." The children leaned in. "The real magic," he said, tapping his chest, "was kindness. That's the secret the forest taught me." The wind whispered through the leaves above. And somewhere deep in the bomb forest, the Serpent Queen smiled again.